I wanted to tell you a little bit about Ireland and our family background as it began in Ireland. And of course, Ireland is a very small country. It's approximately about the size of Indiana, but it's had a huge impact, or its population has, over the years. But nowhere else had the dependency on the potato been more great than it was in Ireland. About a third of the country actually survived on the potato and whatnot. And of course, in the mid-1800s, they had the Great Potato Famine, but it was only discovered in about 2013 what caused that. And it was actually a pathogen, and it was known as Phytophthora infestan. And it's a pathogen that attacks a plant through the leaf, and it travels down through the stem or the tuber and attacks the root of the plant, killing it. And of course, 1/3 of the population essentially survived on the potato. And so when that pathogen started to affect those crops and plants, it really devastated the country. And between 1845 and 1855, the population of Ireland was around 8 million, but it depleted by a third. More than 2 million people either died or migrated away from Ireland during that time period. And of course, back then, times were tough. These were farmers by and large, and really that's where the advent of the shillelagh came into play, because, it was basically a big knotted root that would be shaped into kind of like a big massive hammer that people would carry around, because these guys were out farming in the field and there was a lot of poverty going on. And so they might be happened upon by some highwaymen or roadmen that would try to take whatever possessions they had. And so oftentimes they had to defend themselves out there. And so at the height of the use of the shillelagh, an individual might be carrying two of them, one to defend himself and another one to attack if he was preyed upon and whatnot. But during that time period, that's really what the old song Danny Boy was formed after. If you listen to those lyrics, about the pipes are calling, and from glen to glen and down the mountainside, the summer's gone, and 'tis you must go and I must bide. And what was happening was parents were telling their young children, you need to leave this place. You need to find a better life for yourself. And so they would sound the whistles down at the docks in Ireland weekly. And so people were loading onto those vessels and traveling to some port, often not even known where they were going, but just in search of a better life. And of course, that's really where our lineage came into play over here in the United States. Edward Ned Okeefe was born in Tipperary County, Ireland in 1815, and he and his sister were two of those youngsters that their parents told them, you need to go find a better life. And they got on that boat, and they ultimately arrived in the port of New Orleans, and where they settled over there for a year or two, and then they ultimately made their way, migrated over to Ocean Springs here. And Ned was a teamster by trade. He had surreyed wagons and had horses, and so it was about 1858. He had actually been here a little earlier than that, but Ned had earned enough money to buy his first piece of land, which we have the record of the deed, in about 1858. And so Of course, it was shortly after that that the Civil War broke out, and of course the war was moving further south, and Ned felt the call to duty, and he enlisted in the Civil War, joining the Confederate Army and the Live Oak Rifles Company A of the 3rd Mississippi Infantry as a private, and he fought in the Civil War. But he had acquired that piece of land right here that we're sitting on today in Ocean Springs. And so at the conclusion of the war, he returned home to work the land. But Ned, was a teamster, and he had horses and wagons, and most funeral home businesses evolved out of either someone that had a horse and a wagon, or somebody who might have had a cabinetry shop, or a wood craftsman who would build a coffin for a decedent. But if there was an individual that had a wagon and a horse, if somebody passed away, oftentimes they'd be put on the wagon and be carried out to the cemetery, and that's what Ned did. So his primary employment was to Surrey people around town, kind of like an old day taxi service. People would arrive either by stagecoach or train into Ocean Springs. Ocean Springs was said to be a travel point because of the natural artesian wells that flowed up out of the water, and they were touted to be of a healing nature. And so people would travel from all around to come to Ocean Springs to bathe in those springs with the hope of being healed. And so Ned would meet them at the stagecoach or the train station, and he'd hurry them out to the hotel and then out to the springs and back. And of course, if they weren't healed, occasionally he'd hurry them out to the cemetery on his wagons. That's kind of how he got into that sideline of a business and whatnot, And so it's just continued on over the years as far as the business. I'm actually a 5th generation member of the family business, and we just celebrated 150 years in business in 2015, and it was a real special occasion for us. From Edward's initial involvement in the military, we had my great uncle John Okeefe, who, there's a common thread that runs with the Okeefe family, and it's been an involvement both militarily and politically. And so Ed, we had an alderman in the family here in Ocean Springs very early on in the 2nd generation, and then my great uncle John actually was an adjutant general in the state of Mississippi, but he ran for mayor of the city of Biloxi and was elected, and as it worked out, he was simply in the National Guard at the time, but he was approached shortly after he was elected mayor to become adjutant general of the state of Mississippi, and resigned that post and took that role as adjutant general. And then, of course, my father, Jerry Okeefe, later served in the legislature and also as mayor of the city of Biloxi. But in his early career, he of course, was involved in World War II, and he became a trained pilot through several different aircrafts, graduating up to the Corsair, where he saw combat over Okinawa, and was deemed, in other words, earned the rank of ace fighter pilot. And so on the anniversary of our company anniversary of 150 years, it also coincided with the fact that Congress had seen fit to mint a congressional gold medal for American ace fighter pilots. And in history, there was about 1,437 of those aces. At the time that they minted the medal, there were probably only about 83 of those still living. And so Speaker of the House Bonner at the time called all of those aces to Washington, D.C. for a medal presentation of that Congressional Gold Medal. An ace pilot is an individual that had at least 7 planes that he took down in combat. And in my dad's instance, it was 5 in one day of combat, and the following day, a couple more and all. And so at the time that they were called to Washington for the medal presentation, all 83 of those couldn't travel there. You know, they were obviously getting up in age, and my dad himself was 92 at the time, and so Congress immediately started trying to get those medals out to the pilots that could not attend the ceremony in Washington. And so it coincided with our anniversary here that we celebrated at this original property. And we had a celebration on the front porch, and my dad was presented with that Congressional Gold Medal at that time. And so, as mentioned, I'm a 5th generation, and the 6th generation is also working in the business presently, and with he being my father, having upward of 34 grandchildren and great-grandchildren, there's a strong likelihood that there will be a continuation of the Okeefe family on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. You know, another aspect of our involvement along the coast with the Okeefes is the Irish heritage. We celebrate that. We have been involved with the Hibernia Society. In fact, my Uncle John, my dad's brother, was an orthopedic surgeon here in Biloxi. And he actually formed the Hibernia Marching Society over at Mary Mahoney's. It was just a small group of men that got together and decided to march through town in celebration of Irish heritage, and it's grown ever since. And so they have a parade each year, and a number of festive activities over the course of the year leading up to St. Patrick's Day. And so my father served as Grand Marshal, and I had the honor of being selected to serve as Grand Marshal 1 year behind him. And in fact, have been over the last 5 years or so, actually been giving a little Irish heritage lecture to the junior leadership class of the Mississippi Gulf Coast Chamber of Commerce, which are basically 11th graders that are being involved civically. And so he's my father, and during his generation and ours also have celebrated Mardi Gras on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. He was served as a King d'Iberville and had been a Duke of Mardi Gras prior to that, and I have had a similar kind of involvement, and my son beyond me has been involved. Our family enjoys the festivities of the coast, and we enjoy promoting Irish heritage and continuing the lineage of our business. Our family is Catholic, and I'm one of 13 children. I'm the 10th of 13. I had 7 sisters and 5 brothers, and so I guess you could say we're a good Catholic family, you know, but at any rate, we've had a continued relationship with the priest, and you know, on the Mississippi Gulf Coast as well as the nation. I mean, the original outreach spawned from Ireland. There were Irish priests and nuns who came out of Ireland to go out and to preach the word and find those immigrants. And build, those churches all around. And so there's been a continued association with the church and the Okeefes all along. And, as an indicator, my father was very, very close with one of the local bishops. He was awarded the Bishop's Cross, and have made substantial, financial contributions to the Catholic Diocese of Biloxi, both he and my mother and our family. And so there's been a continued relationship. I have three sons, Jeff Jr., Jacob, and Jordan Okeefe, that were all just recently received their first degree in the Knights of Columbus, as an association. I remember, after my dad passed at the age of 93, they asked me to come up to the Knights of Columbus Hall, 1244 over in Biloxi, and just talk about, my dad a little bit. And I told them the story of us living on the beachfront and the fact that I had all those sisters, and they lived in a dormitory type living upstairs where all the boys were downstairs. And so I remember there was an attic on either side of the dormitory room upstairs, but I would go in there and I always saw these swords in there, and these long sheaths. And I'd pull one from the sheath, and man, it had all kind of beautiful carving down the barrel of it, and whatnot, down the blade, I guess I should say. But anyway, it wasn't until later that I realized that those were the swords of the fourth degree Knights of Columbus, members of the lineage of our family. And some of them were so old they were rusted you couldn't even pull them from the sheath, But if you go to the Knights of Columbus Hall, you will see a lineage of Okeefe association with that lodge and their involvement. My eldest sister wore a habit, for a number of years, and had actually gotten to the point of making her final vow, but they do pose that in a very deep and sincere, meaningful way. And, after she really did some soul searching, she thought maybe, she didn't have that, desire to maybe do that the rest of her life. And so she, while she was very devout and religious both, she, elected not to become a nun, but our family, as I say, has always been deeply involved. And of course, the nuns, like the Irish priest, were a lot of the early educators, and they, they were very well attuned to teaching, and they were excellent disciplinarians also, which is not a bad thing. There were certainly some good stews, Irish potato and meat stews, that is kind of a staple of an Irish type upbringing. But we didn't, I think being several generations removed from the early immigrant, I think we ate pretty much. Matter of fact, my youngest brother, Joe, is a journalist, and Joe wound up actually authoring a cookbook. It's called Cooking on the Coast, and it can be found at cookingonthecoast.com. But it's got a lot of great recipes that our family grew up on, and it's got recipes of some of our friends that grew up in this area as well. And there was a little toast that Wade Geis, who was the civil defense director for the Mississippi Gulf Coast, he penned for the Irish Heritage Society, and it goes kind of like this. The lads and the lasses of the Emerald Isle have spread as far as the eye can see and far beyond. The sun never ceases to shine on the face of an Irish lad somewhere in the land. The moonbeams never fail to kiss the brow of an Irish lass somewhere in the land. The Irish have lived, laughed, and cried. The Irish have fought, and the Irish have died. The Irish have sailed the seas, trod the plains, and climbed the highest mountains, all in search of a broader horizon and a more beautiful vista. A toast to the lads and the lasses of the Emerald Isle.